can you lend me $5? I haven't eaten in 3 days. I was stunned by my mom's words. What on earth was going on? I didn't understand. Absolutely not lending you anything. John, standing next to me, was shaking with anger, his eyes wide open. You're saying you can't lend her a mere $5, even when she hasn't eaten? John snapped back to reality after hearing my words, and his usual calm expression returned. I'm sorry. What I meant was that I won't be helping Tom with money anymore. I can understand where John is coming from. He probably thought that it wouldn't be surprising if Tom was using our mom to get money. My name is Amy. I'm a 55-year-old stay-at-home wife. I live with my husband, John, who is 5 years older than me. Both our kids are grown up and moved out after getting jobs. It's a bit lonely, but John and I are enjoying a relaxed life since our parenting days are over. Don is a man of few words, but he's kind and gentle. I've never seen him raise his voice. After retiring at 60, Don was rehired by the company he worked for and commutes there about 3 days a week. Back at my parents' place, both my mom and dad live together, and has an older brother, Tom, who is 3 years his senior. Unlike John, Tom tends to speak his mind immediately and often gets emotional. They're polar opposites in personality. My mom's hobby was listening to stand-up comedy on a small cassette player. She had a bunch of these comedy tapes, and I remember her laughing at them since I was a kid. Dad was as gentle as Mom. I barely remember him getting angry. Back in the day, he worked at a fancy restaurant and was a great cook. He often taught me his recipes. My dad loved to skillfully roast a turkey and serve it to everyone when the family gathered for occasions like Thanksgiving. I remember Tom looking at him with admiration, thinking he was so cool. Dad often made dinner during the weekdays. As Mom and I sat at the living room table, sipping on tea and waiting for dinner, she'd say with a smile, "It's funny. Dad's the one bustling in the kitchen while I just relax here." During her happy face, I always thought I'd want a marriage like that when I got older. But after a while, and passed away. He looked healthy, but he had cancer. Once it got worse, everything happened so quickly, and I guess Mom didn't even have time to grieve. And for a while, she became like a hollow shell, often zoning out. I was worried she'd fall sick from the stress, but my kids kept visiting and cheering her up. Thanks to that, she regained her spirit and was able to smile and live like before. But around that time, Tom decided to quit his job and open a bar. I wondered if he was influenced by my father, who had been a chef. Tom was impressionable. He probably thought my dad's cooking skills were awesome. Despite the economy not being so great, Tom was determined to start his own business, even though most of the family objected. Even John was against it. They thought Tom was too selfish and arrogant. If he went independent, they were sure he'd fail. I too doubted Tom, who is all show and no substance. He poured his savings into it, even mortgaged his apartment and started his bar. But his arrogant nature got the better of him. Soon, customers stopped coming, and within a year, he had to close down. As relations within his family became strained as his business went downhill, and when he closed shop, his wife left with their kids. All Tom was left with was a mountain of debt. Having nowhere else to go, he turned to my family home. While everyone blamed Tom, only my mother was kind to him. She told Tom, "If you have nowhere to stay, just live here." I was more worried than opposed to the idea. I could easily imagine Tom taking advantage of Mom's kindness. Unshared my concerns, but Tom, seeing an opportunity, moved in quickly. Little did we know, this kindness would come back to haunt us. Tom started living at my parents' house, mooching off my mother and spending his days lazing around without any particular purpose. Whenever I went to visit my mom, he was often sprawled on the couch with a beer in one hand. In his other hand, he typically held a horse racing newspaper. It seemed like Tom was taking full advantage of living at my family's home. After a while of staying there, Tom got remarried. He got married without consulting or even notifying us beforehand and started living with my mom at the family home. His new wife, named Blair, was 9 years younger than him and stood out with her flashy makeup and long nails. I've met her once, and she has a loud voice and doesn't hesitate to speak her mind. I was concerned about whether Blair, with her strong-willed personality, would get along with my mom. The Blair used to work at Tom's favorite bar, and they bonded over their shared interest in horse racing. "You take tights protective vacan," would say even she teaches me how to enjoy life. However, M's idea of enjoying life wasn't the most reputable. One day, surprisingly, and Blair came over to our place. And apparently, they were looking for jobs but had no luck, and they asked for some financial support until they found one. "Can you help us out financially until I find the next job?" "Just for a while," Tom asked, leaning back on the couch and crossing his legs, his tone casual and demanding. I couldn't tell if Tom was genuinely in need or just being arrogant with his request. "I've been thinking of starting a part-time job too, but I can't find one." While Blair's words seemed earnest, I had a feeling there was more to the story, especially since she had an expensive-looking designer bag with her. It's true that Tom lost everything due to a failed business venture. "All right, you'll help out, but please make sure to find a job soon." Tom, likely having his own concerns, decided to support Tom, his only brother. Thanks, John. I too felt compelled to support Tom. We decided to give Tom and Blair $2,000 every month for their living expenses. It was money we had saved up for our retirement, but we handed it over without mentioning this. I believed this tough situation wouldn't last long. They'd find jobs, and we wouldn't need to give them money anymore. They must even start repaying us. Looking back now, I realize I was probably too optimistic. Before we knew it, a year had passed since then, and we hadn't heard a peep from Tom and Blair. Fed up with Tom's lack of communication, we decided to pay a visit to their home. Even after ringing the doorbell, there was no response for a while. Finally, Blair answered, but only via the intercom, and made no move to open the front door. Look, it's really inconvenient when you show up out of the blue. At least give us a heads up. It's just common courtesy, she snapped in a harsh tone without opening the door. Even when I insisted asking her to let us in, she wouldn't budge. We're busy right now. She firmly repeated this single excuse. That day, we eventually gave in to Blair's resistance and turned back. My main concern wasn't the money. It was about my mom. I'd come to regret not being more persistent and getting into the house that day. And a few days after visiting the house, something shocking happened. That day, there was a storm with heavy rain and gusting winds outside. Anne and I decided to stay inside, closing the storm shutters early. But late into the night, as I was dozing off under my blanket, startled by the rain and wind battering the shutters, the doorbell rang repeatedly. Wondering what was happening, I woke up John to check things out. Looking at the doorbell camera, I was stunned to see my drenched mother. "Help me? Amy!" My mother pleaded through the intercom. John and I rushed to the front door and opened it. Standing there was my mother, soaked from the rain, her hair a mess from the gusty winds, and leaves and grass stuck all over her. Moreover, she was wearing sandals, and her feet were covered in cuts. "Can you lend me $5? I haven't eaten in 3 days." I was stunned by my mom's words. What on earth was going on? I just didn't get it. "I'm not giving you a dime," then exclaimed, trembling with anger and wide-eyed. I was taken aback by the strength of John's refusal. Even my mother seemed to shrink back from his vehement tone, looking like she might collapse. I had never seen John yell or get so angry. I couldn't hold back and retorted to John, "How can you not lend just $5, knowing she hasn't eaten?" And suddenly seemed to snap back to himself at my words, his face regaining its usual calm expression. But with tears in his eyes and a sad expression, he let my mother into the house. "I'm sorry for raising my voice." My mother, still a bit confused, entered the house. For now, we had her sit on the living room couch, considering she could catch a cold. I handed her a towel. I took another look at my mother. She had become thin and frail, and her once abundant hair had thinned out considerably. Her fingertips skeletal. What on earth had happened to her? I was filled with questions. John gently spoke to my mother in a soft tone. "I'm sorry for earlier. What I meant was, I'm not helping out with money for Tom anymore." I could understand where John was coming from. He probably thought it wouldn't be a surprise if Tom was taking advantage of my mother. But right now, my main concern was her. "Mom, are you okay?" She remained silent, looking down. "Would you like to stay here with us for a while?" She continued to remain silent. "Did Tom say something to you?" After a long pause, during which she intently looked into John's eyes, she began to speak slowly. "But you both are annoyed by me, right? You hate me." Confused by her words, John and I exchanged glances. Why would she think like that? Still gazing at us sternly, she continued, Amy and John, you both started to hate me. I heard it from Tom. What are you talking about? There's no way that's true. I couldn't help but retort. I could never hate my beloved mother. Tears began to spill from her eyes, and she started to sob. I've always loved you. Mom, I could never hate you. I've missed you so much. Unable to contain myself, I embraced my mother. She hugged me back, and we both began crying loudly. My mother began to recount the harrowing events that had befallen her. There was a time when my mother, murmuring that she wanted to see me, tried to leave the house in the middle of the night like she was sleepwalking. Since then, she was tied to the bed by her hands and feet, unable to move. She wasn't even allowed to go to the bathroom, and diapers were placed by her bedside. The only times her restraints were removed were for meals and when she was made to clean the house. She was fed only a slice of bread and was allowed to eat just twice a day. And every chance they got, Tom and Blair would spread rumors and lies about John and me. They claimed that John and I had abandoned my mother. They told my mother that we'd always hated her, and a litany of other falsehoods. Tom and Blair left the house with my mother still tied up and did not return. Because of this, my mother was left without food for 3 days. Bound as she was, she couldn't take a bath or use the restroom. She had to make do with the diapers placed by her bed. But believing her life was in danger, she somehow managed to free herself and escape from the house. Listening to my mother's distressing account, John and I were left aghast. It was beyond cruel, unthinkable for any human being to do. Ever Tom and Blair some kind of demons? Regardless, my heart ached for my mother. It would take anyone an hour to walk from there. But with her weakened state, how many hours did it take her? And to make matters worse, the weather outside was stormy, with rain beating down hard. What must she have felt making her way here? But the thought of it brought tears to my eyes, which I couldn't hold back. It's all right now. From now on, we'll protect you. Upon hearing these words, my mother repeatedly nodded, perhaps out of relief. What were Tom and Blair telling me then? To be frank, it was all lies. My mother looked taken aback. She was someone who inherently trusted people. She had never experienced such malevolent acts before. Actually, all these revelations must have been a shock to her. Tom probably relied on having a place to live and aimed for your pension. But don't worry, we'll keep you safe. We promise. Or with those words, a smile of relief spread across my mother's face. I decided to prepare a comforting dish of tomato soup with chicken, a favorite of my father's. As she sipped it, she murmured, "This brings back memories." While savoring every mouthful, his tears welled up in John's eyes as he looked at my mother and muttered to himself, "I'll never forgive them for what they did." But when I asked Mom in detail about where Tom and Blair might be, she said they went to Chicago for some horse racing. Upon checking, the big race is tomorrow, so they'll probably be back sometime after that. John and I began planning our counter move. The next morning, I served my mother more of my father's favorite dishes. Her appetite had waned, but she relished every bite, remarking, "It's been so long since I had something this delicious." Seeing her eat with a smile, a pang of sorrow surged through me. How could someone as kind and trusting as my mother have been subjected to such cruelty? After finishing her meal, my mother began to speak quietly. She said she didn't like my demeanor, claiming I act too prim and proper. She'd kicked me. I was taken aback. How could someone do something so cruel? The mistreatment my mother endured filled me with sorrow, and tears spilled from my eyes. Gently, she wiped away my tears. "Amy, I'm sorry for bringing up such things." She looked down, appearing apologetic. You did nothing wrong. We're gonna protect you from now on. They won't hurt you ever again." She gazed at me with a smile. I smiled back at her. After breakfast, once she had settled down, I took her to the hospital after she had taken a shower. The medical tests revealed she was severely malnourished and dehydrated. Considering her age, hospitalization was recommended, so she was admitted for a few days. Thankfully, no other illnesses were detected, and she'd be discharged as soon as she regained her nutrition. However, the doctor, in a stern tone, inquired about her living conditions. I explained the situation she had been in. It seemed the doctor initially suspected I might be abusing her. But once I clarified everything, the doctor's demeanor softened into a smile, and then he told me he'd contact the authorities since there was strong suspicion of abuse. This was just what I had hoped for, so I quickly agreed. After a while, a representative from social services arrived, and we discussed my mother's meals, confinement, and the violence she endured. There were bruises all over her body. Given the severe nature of the situation, the representative said they would also consult with the police and then departed. Watching my mother sleep peacefully, I couldn't help but feel regret. Only I had realized sooner and checked in on her. Tears streamed down my face. Writes prepon idea, and I'll never forgive them. They'll pay for this. I held onto her frail hand. She woke up, offering me a gentle smile. "When you go to my house, please bring my boombox and my box of stand-up comedy tapes." It was something she loved. I nodded firmly in agreement. The next morning, John and I headed to Tom's family home. My anger far outweighed my sorrow, but John was even angrier than I was. We rang the doorbell several times, but no one answered. Really thinking they weren't home, we were about to leave when we heard a groggy voice. Knowing that Tom and Blair were inside, we used our spare key to unlock the front door and entered the house. Seeing us in the living room, Blair looked shocked. "What are you two doing here all of a sudden?" she exclaimed. I confronted Blair. "What's wrong with a child visiting her parents' house?" She mumbled, struggling for words. "Well, it's not like that, but looking around the house." I was appalled. It was cluttered with trash, and the smell of rotting food was overpowering. The floor felt sticky as well. "This place is a mess. When was the last time you cleaned?" John remarked with a sense of astonishment. Tom, lounging on the sofa, clicked his tongue in annoyance upon seeing us. It's because that hag doesn't clean. He muttered under his breath, and John reacted immediately. You mean to tell me you made her handle even the food waste? At piercing eyes? John glared at Tom. Beam put his hand over his mouth, as if realizing he had said too much, and quickly left the room. As he departed, Gin commented, "The reek of alcohol. Have you been drinking all night?" I turned my attention back to Blair. Her hair was disheveled. Her shirt stretched out around the collar, revealing her undergarments. And it looked like she hadn't completely removed her makeup, leaving her eyes ringed in black. Noticing my gaze, Blair looked down, seemingly embarrassed and annoyed. You should have called before coming over. It's common courtesy. This is such an inconvenience, Blair said, picking up a cigarette from an ashtray, lighting it up. Keeping past noon without cleaning is your idea of common courtesy? I presume, she retorted. Blair struggled to reply when Tom stormed back in and shouted, Hey, where'd that old hag go? He must have noticed now, looking at her empty bed. She's with us. She was in such a dire state that we had to hospitalize her. Had we been a bit later, she might have died, I replied, exaggerating a bit for effect. Tom glared at Blair. I told you, you do too much. This with a frustrated tone. Blair shot back. You were the one who first said to tie her up because she was making noise in the middle of the night. After all, she gets food here, but she barely helps out around the house. Listening to them trade blame, I was boiling with rage. She hadn't eaten in 3 days and didn't even have a single cent. It's unforgivable. With Tom not working and no income, what can we do? We're just trying to save. Even though both she and Tom appeared well-fed and healthy. But look at you two, healthy and plump, while she's starved. And where have you two been these past few days? It's none of your business, Blair answered, feigning indifference. John, noticing a horse racing newspaper nearby, grabbed and flung it at Tom. You've been betting on horse races in Chicago. We know about it. Tim uncomfortably scratched his head, searching for an explanation. Well, that's, became furious with Tom and Blair's unrepentant, parasitic way of life, always taking from others. I was so frustrated that tears welled up in my eyes. Tom's all skin and bones, yet you two just spend the money we send and Mom's Social Security without working. We know you've been partying with it. John must have been just as mad. He loudly confronted Tom. You two never even gave her decent food, and even tied her to the bed at night, didn't you? According to Mom, Tom and Blair lived it up with the money John sent and her Social Security, wasting it on bars, horse races, and casinos. Where's your proof? That old hag just says whatever she wants. Blair snapped. Was this her true nature? I decided to bring out the evidence. Fridge from the bed where Mom used to sleep. I brought her cherished tape player into the living room. I put in a cassette tape labeled as stand-up comedy. Why would a stand-up comedy tape be evidence? Is the comedian gonna testify or something? Tom and Blair smirked at me. Ignoring them, I pressed play. Just tie her up. We're gonna hit the tracks in Chicago and make some big bucks, so you better behave. Look, if you don't, you'll get hurt like last time. When we get back, tell us where your checkbook is. Seriously, can't find it anywhere. Just wonder where she hid it. The sound coming from the tape player wasn't comedy, but Tom and Blair's voices abusing my mom. She had recorded their abuse over the comedy tape. That's probably why she wanted me to bring it. Upon hearing this, Anne and Blair went weak in the knees and collapsed. Is this what Tom called the joys of life? It's all you guys' fault that my mom got so thin and frail. It's not our fault, Blair shouted back at us. As John and I were looking down at Tom and Blair, the doorbell rang. "They're here." I went to the door. I returned to the living room with police officers and a government official. Tom and Blair looked shocked. The official showed the medical reports and a doctor's statement. The police went to check the bed. "You two committed a grave crime. You'll pay for this." But the police properly investigate and realize just how horrible the things you've done are. I handed over the abuse recording to the police. Tim and Blair will likely face the appropriate charges. And told Tom, "I'm not gonna send you money anymore. We're cutting ties with you too. This house belongs to my mom. We're gonna sell it and come back." Suddenly, Tom apologized. Probably he finally realized the gravity of his situation. "Amy, if we lose this house, we won't have anywhere to live. I promise I'll really look for a job this time. Please give us a break." Owing suit. Blair also said, "I'll also help take care of your mother. Please forgive us." The two of them seemed to finally realize the dire situation they were in, and with a change of heart, they apologized calmly. "It's too late. We can't trust you two anymore. We'll change. I swear. Just give us one more chance. Just this once." How many times will they keep saying just this once? Do they really think we'll give in? You'll definitely pay for what you've done. Please, never contact us again. John pulled out a checkbook from a box containing a cassette tape. "This is what you were desperately looking for, right? This checkbook contains the money my parents worked hard to save, and my father's insurance money. It was there all along. If only we had that." They began to wail loudly. But when they were taken away by the police, they were bad-mouthing each other. They resisted till the end. They cried and screamed the entire time. They were forcibly pushed into a police car and taken away. Evidence against Tom and Blair, aside from the audio recording of abuse, included bed restraints. Additionally, neighbors had heard Tom's loud rants and Blair's shrieks during the night and testified to the abuse. Upon further investigation, it was discovered that a large insurance policy had been taken out on my mother, and they were being rigorously interrogated every day. The police shared this information with me during their interviews. They were certain to be found guilty and face a severe sentence. They are likely going to spend some time in prison. I hope they truly face their crimes and atone for them. I'm pressing charges against them for damages. After their release, they'll probably be paying for the rest of their lives. I told John I wanted to live with my mom. John readily agreed. Yeah, let's live with her. After discussing with my mother, we decided to use the money from selling the family house to renovate ours. Even though Mom, John, and I are getting on in years, it's a new beginning for us. It's quite exciting. Mom seems to be looking forward to it, chatting happily with the architect about wanting a spacious kitchen and such. Our peaceful days continued until my eldest son's wife announced her pregnancy. She mentioned wanting to raise her child at our home after giving birth. Her parents are currently on an overseas assignment, so she turned to us for support. It will be my first grandchild and my mom's first great-grandchild. Our quiet days are on hold for now, and it seems we're gonna be busy for a while. There's something I've been wanting to ask Mom someday. Do you think John and I are like you and Dad were as a couple? You don't need to come visit me in the hospital anymore. Oh, but I do need you to pay for the treatment costs. What? What are you talking about? I couldn't help but feel confused by his words, especially considering how I had been working part-time jobs tirelessly for the sake of my husband. Even after he fell ill, the coverage, I had been covering the transportation costs for his hospital visits and even the treatment costs with the money I earned. Your role is over now. Thanks for everything up until now. Don't joke around. I'm completely serious. And I'm gonna remarry your best friend. Was he really asking me to accept just that after I dedicated my whole life to him? Rage was bubbling up from the depths of my heart as if magma was about to erupt. As if to provoke me further, he continued. Sorry, but you're gonna have to leave our home soon. It's not your place anymore. Are you serious? Don't make me repeat myself. Since when? I couldn't help but voice the question that had been on my mind. Oh, it's been a while. Probably shortly after I got sick. I see. Even though I was bewildered by this sudden revelation, I wasn't going to agree to a divorce so easily. He might have thought I was just going to comply quietly, but that was a big mistake. I'm quite busy as well. Here, sign this. I'll probably have to deal with hospital visits and maybe even hospitalization. I'll handle it. Sorry and thank you. I immediately started working part-time jobs. We did have some savings, but I was uncertain about how long he would need treatment and how much it would cost. We informed our son, but he was still in college at the time, and it wasn't practical to ask for his help frequently. Thank you for today. You've been a big help in so many ways. A problem at all. The best friends, aren't we? Besides, it's all give and take. I worried best friend. Susan came to check on me, and it was really reassuring. After all, she was the one who helped me out when I was having trouble looking for a part-time job. Thanks to her being there for me, I managed to get by. In fact, when work was busy, I used to ask Susan for rides to and from the hospital. It really helps that you came all this way. Don't mention it. I didn't have much else to do anyway. Still, doesn't your husband say anything about it? Oh, he's fine. Seems like he's not that interested in me anymore. What? Really? A strange voice escaped from me in surprise. I've known Susan for a long time, and she has always been beautiful, never changing. She's the same age as me, and she seems even more charming after turning 40. You're so beautiful. I'm envious. I couldn't help but sigh. Standing next to her makes me feel embarrassed. Have you had any good things happen lately? Your smile seems to have increased. Just a little. It's a secret from you? What's that about? You have to tell me sometime. Up some other time. I saw a slight lift in Susan's smile. I soon forgot about it, but little did I know what was coming. Like the treatment was going well, but proportionally, my husband's attitude started to change. You have it easy. Why? It was when I visited the hospital for his checkup. His sudden words left me confused. Even if you say you're working, you still rely on your best friend for rides. What are you talking about? Yes, she gives me a ride when I'm busy, but busy? You're just working at a grocery store. Don't exaggerate. The question came to my mind. I used to ask Susan for rides when I was busy, but recently she started offering to take me on her own. She even went to check on my husband in the hospital on my behalf when he was hospitalized for a checkup before. Thinking about it, what are you spacing out for? You did bring what I asked for, right? Yes, of course. You could be a bit more thoughtful. Just hand it over. What my husband asked for were things to kill time, magazines, and drinks. While enduring his sarcastic remarks, I handed over the convenience store bag. Fortunately, my cancer was detected early, so I am able to be this healthy, but if my condition was worse, it wouldn't have been like this. You can go back now. But isn't there some explanation or something after this? I don't need you here for that. What? I'm your wife? It's only natural for me to hear about it. You don't get it. It's just a progress report. For SQ even so. I tried desperately to argue, but my husband's mind did not change. Thinking that arguing here would be pointless, I decided to leave. If that's how you feel, I'll go back. Yeah, take care. Even as I closed the door to his room, my husband didn't look at me, engrossed in his magazine. I started to wonder, why am I doing all this? 8 weeks later, my husband was to be discharged, but his attitude only got worse. I'm glad he could be discharged. The next day, it was decided to celebrate my husband's return from the hospital by inviting Susan over to our house. Susan, thank you for coming today. Since you've made the effort to come, please make yourself at home. Thank you. What's Betty doing? I'm the main event today, you know. I'll get everything ready now. Then I'll help out too. That's when my husband chimed in, stopping Susan. Susan, you don't have to do anything. You're our guest today. Susan looked at me as if to say, what should I do? I thought it would be nice if she helped since she seemed unsure, but I kept that thought to myself. Susan, just relax. It's not a big deal. The smile I gave Susan at that moment might have been strained. My feelings were just that complex. Speaking from the kitchen, I saw them continuing their friendly conversation. He was showing her a smile he hadn't shown me since he was diagnosed with cancer. "Hey, what are you dawdling for?" "Sorry." Rushing back to them, my husband started to make snide remarks. "Come on. Susan is here, you know. Get it together." "John, I really don't mind. Betty, you should be thankful to Susan." "Yeah." I couldn't accept why I was being told all this. However, with Susan present, I couldn't complain and just had to bear it. No, I had no choice but to bear it. After about 3 hours, Susan left. But that wasn't the end of it. "I'll leave the cleanup to you." He made a mess drinking and didn't even offer to help. I couldn't hold back my irritation any longer and blurted out a question. "By the way, when did you become so close to Susan?" At the atmosphere in the room instantly tensed. "Don't tell me. Are you jealous of Susan? You, a woman of your age." My husband laughed while pointing at me. "It's not that funny. It is what it is." And from that day on, my husband completely started to belittle me. However, the situation became dire. That the cancer that we thought was completely cured had unexpectedly metastasized. Why do I have to be hospitalized again? My husband showed signs of exhaustion, but those were my lines. Since his discharge, I had reduced my part-time work from 5 days a week to 2, but the thought of increasing my work hours again was daunting. And on the morning of his hospitalization, he suddenly said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, but you don't have to come visit anymore." "What? Why? You've been having a hard time too, haven't you?" "That might be true, but besides, I need you to earn a steady income." He used to look down on my part-time job, but now he was conveniently changing his tune. Actually, we had almost used up our savings for his previous hospital stay and surgery. Furthermore, since his discharge, he'd been pouring quite a lot of money into his hobbies as if to relieve the stress from his hospital stay. I was planning to work more anyway. Then stop hanging around here and go work already. Feeling like I was being treated as a nuisance. I decided to leave right away. "Well, I'm gonna head home then." "Bo, hang in there." It was when I tried to leave the hospital. I passed by a familiar face. "Susan, what are you doing here?" "Oh, hey, come to think of it, John is getting hospitalized, right?" "Yeah. So, what about you, Susan?" "A friend of mine is also in this hospital. I came to visit." I had a small chat with Susan before going home, but I couldn't stop thinking about running into Susan at the hospital. However, I couldn't put my finger on what was bothering me. In the end, I went to work part-time while holding on to these unsettled feelings. "Is that you?" "Betty, I have a favor to ask." "A favor? I thought you weren't going to rely on me." I got a call from my husband the day after he was admitted to the hospital. He had been so aggressive, but in the end he only came to me with empty threats. "That doesn't matter right now. Let's get over here quickly." "All right. I understand. I'll be right there." In the end, going to the hospital just meant running errands for my husband. After that, my husband developed various illnesses in addition to cancer, and he repeatedly got admitted and discharged from the hospital. Each time, I kept doing errands and providing transportation for him. Before I knew it, a whole decade had flown by. The reason I hadn't divorced him until now was because of our son. It might be about time, huh? You stayed this long because of me, right? I think it's a good idea, too. My son's stepfather was strict with single parents due to his own tough experiences. That's why I endured until my son got married. When my son came to visit his parental home, I decided to take a chance and talk to him about it. However, it feels like I'm losing if I'm the one who brings it up. Well, knowing him, he's definitely gonna say something. That's why I'm gonna wait for a while. I can endure it for that. That's fine, but don't push yourself too hard. Okay. However, every time my husband said harsh words to me or treated me badly, he would fall ill. I even started to think that maybe this was his punishment. This time was no exception, as he ended up being hospitalized with a stomach ulcer. Ironically, it felt like it should have been me. I couldn't help but think that. However, it seemed like he would be okay with medication, so his hospital stay would be short. Heck, then came the day of his admission, and I went to visit him. Fine, from now on, you don't need to come visit me. Oh, but I do need you to cover the medical bills. What? What are you talking about? I had been subjected to all sorts of things until now, but I was astounded by my husband who just wanted to use me for his convenience. Acclimations of ill patients. I had been providing transportation for his hospital visits and even paying for his medical bills with the money I earned. You've served your purpose. Thanks for everything until now. Don't joke with me. I'm completely serious. Plus, I'm going to marry. With your best friend. My best friend? Don't tell me. Susan? Yeah, that's right. I'm marrying Susan. She's more beautiful and kind-hearted than you. However, this raised a big question. Divorce him and marry me instead, he said. Excellence. And just like that, as if the word best friend set off a volcano, rage welled up from the depths of my heart. My husband continued, as if to provoke me further. Sorry, but you need to get out of the house soon. It's not your place anymore. Are you serious? I asked. Since when? I pressed on, asking my husband further questions. It's been a long time, probably just after I got sick. I see. Although I was confused by his sudden wish for a divorce. I wasn't ready to just agree to it smoothly. My husband might have thought I'd comply, but he was sorely mistaken. I'm busy too. Here, sign this, he said, pulling out divorce papers from a drawer. I was irritated, wondering just how much he wanted to divorce me, but honestly, I was tired of being married to such a person. Fine, a trusting sucks, I'll divorce you. That's a good decision for once. Yeah, that's right. As I said this, my husband gave me a mocking grin. No holding back now. That the curtain on my revenge had risen. In that case, I'll go ahead and submit this divorce paper myself. Is that so? Thanks. Taking the divorce paper from my husband, I decided to go home first. Sitting on the sofa, I took a deep breath. The real challenge was just beginning. I also called my son to tell him about the situation. "I can't believe you were prepared to this extent." "Well, it means you really wanted a divorce, doesn't it? Besides, the timing isn't bad. He was the one who brought it up. After all, and if you're getting kicked out of the house, come stay with us." "That's a relief, but are you sure?" "Of course. I've already talked to my wife about it to some extent." "Thank you." With that, I packed a few days' worth of belongings in a bag and headed to my son's house. I was surprised at how welcoming they were. I felt relieved to have allies. But to think he's been planning this for nearly a decade. What was he thinking? I pondered on the muttered words of my son. Thinking about it, there had indeed been signs. She must have come to the hospital to see my husband. I had become so enraged with my husband for treating me like an obstruction and Susan for deceiving me that I wanted to make them suffer. But what are you gonna do now? "Don't worry. I've got this." The divorce paper? Yes. His name is already on it, and I told him I would submit it myself. I see, so that's your plan. It seemed like my son had caught on to my scheme. As long as I don't submit this piece of paper to the authorities, we are still married. Though I suspected infidelity, I had no concrete proof. That's why I decided not to submit it immediately and aim to gather evidence instead. I feel bad for asking you, but I might need his help. That's a given. So where do we start? First, we wait for him to be discharged from the hospital. He wanted me out, so he must be planning to live in that house. But the other party is your best friend, isn't she? Are you okay with that? I let out a deep sigh. If that's the case, then I'm ready. Even though we were best friends, she did something she shouldn't have. At this point, I reached out to a certain person. That's Susan's husband, Tom. It seems like he was suddenly faced with a divorce, just like me. When I made a certain proposal to him, he readily accepted it. Well then, I'm counting on you. I hope this works out. Susan used to tell me that she wasn't getting enough attention, but apparently that was a lie, and it seems like she was the one ignoring him. They really were two of a kind. When I heard this story, all I could do was sigh. For now, just leave it to me. I'll make those two pay for their sins. I anxiously awaited my husband's discharge from the hospital. He was discharged about 10 days after being taken care of at my son's house. To make sure everything was perfect, I contacted my husband once. "I have some belongings I want to pick up. Is that okay?" Belongings? Didn't you take everything with you? I'm sorry. There's just something I really need to bring with me. You can throw everything else away. And how's Susan doing? Oh, she's fine. We're gonna live together in 2 days. So get everything done before that. However, I had no intention of following those instructions. It had to be when the two of them were together. 2 days later, I headed to the house with my son driving. I still had the keys, so I sneaked inside. What are you doing here? I swung open the living room door with force. There, the two of them were sitting on the sofa, holding hands. Why are you here? Did you forget? I said I was coming to get my belongings. Then I of the twin scan. I glanced at Susan. She looked surprised and her eyes were wide open. Susan, long time no see. You look well. Susan looked down. Maybe she was feeling guilty about stealing a friend's husband, even if it was just a little. But it's too late to feel that now. Just grab your stuff and get out this. Isn't your house anymore why this should still be my house too, right? What are you talking about? We're divorced, aren't we? Hearing that, I couldn't help but smile slyly. I did give you the divorce papers, didn't I? The divorce papers, huh? Is this what you mean? I showed him what he had given me that time. You didn't file it? And go file it right now. Don't worry, I'll make sure to file it later. But first, there's something I need to do. What's that? He looked completely clueless about what was about to begin. He was fine now, but I was looking forward to seeing how long that would last. Since I haven't filed this, we're still married. And yet you've brought a husband here. You know what this means, right? What? He was stupid and didn't understand anything, but the other one was different. Looking at Susan, her face was turning pale. John, this is serious. Why are you worrying so much? What she's saying isn't a big deal. It's not that. I was tired of watching my husband make a fool of himself, so I decided to reveal the truth. You might not realize it, but what you guys are doing right now is flat out cheating. Our relationship has been over for a long time. That might be true, but legally we're still married. And if we're doing this, it's inevitably considered cheating. At that moment, the husband stood up, looking like he was about to grab me. You tricked me. Don't be ridiculous. I did say I'd file for divorce, but I never said I'd do it right away. How can I accept that? That's not the issue here. It's your mistake for misunderstanding on your own. Were you getting ahead of yourself? What does that mean? He was blatantly shifting the blame and being defiant. I'm going to demand alimony. There might even be a division of property. So that was your plan all along. It's payback for everything you've done up until now. Damn it. That's unfortunate for you. The husband was mumbling to himself, wondering why this was happening to him. However, there was one more person I needed to punish. Susan must have heard our conversation just now. You realize I'm going to have to demand alimony from you as well, right? But we're best friends. Can't we settle this more amicably? Indeed, we were best friends. Until just a moment ago. Oh, and Susan, you did give the divorce papers to John, didn't you? How did you know that? If you brought up this topic, a smart woman like Susan would have figured it out by now. No way! That's right. John hasn't filed for divorce either, so you might get a demand for alimony from him as well. Suddenly, Susan stood up. Susan, I'm going home. Goodbye. Did that melt? Susan left the house. The husband was left behind, standing there with his mouth agape. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. After it's really unfortunate, even Susan left you. It's all your fault. Can you stop blaming others for once? Not everything is my fault. Then, unexpectedly, he seemed to be out of moves and changed his attitude. You're right. I seem to have forgotten how important you were. Betty, your words made me realize that. Finally, you've come to your senses. I was out of my mind, so I could anticipate what my husband was about to say. That's precisely why I didn't want to let him say it. I'm telling you now, I'm still going to demand alimony, and we're getting a divorce. I can see right through your intentions. I've apologized, haven't I? Actually, as if an apology would make me forgive you. What kind of woman would get back together with a loser who even got dumped by his affair partner? Having said what I wanted to say and feeling satisfied, I began to get ready to leave. My husband then grabbed onto my leg. Please, I can't live like this. Excuse me? That's none of my business. Could you let go of me? I shook off my husband and left the house, returning to my son. Alex, how did it go? It was great in so many ways. I see. You do look like you've cleared up. Since we're here, let's eat something delicious before we go home. I had never felt so refreshed before. There were still things left to do, but for today, seeing my husband's face of despair was enough satisfaction for me. A few days later, I promptly requested a divorce mediation from a lawyer. I wanted to settle things before my husband could start any troublesome arguments. He probably never thought it would come to this, but that was his mistake. Hello, Susan. I got a call from Susan on my way back from consulting with a lawyer. There was a moment of silence over the phone. Is there something you need? I'm really sorry about this situation. I will make sure to pay the compensation. And how are you holding up? We've talked it over and we've decided not to get a divorce. Well, I wish you happiness. Right. Susan seemed like she wanted to say something more, but I hung up the phone. I felt like if we kept talking, I might end up forgiving her, which isn't something I can easily do. After all, she had been deceiving me for nearly 10 years. Of course, Susan wasn't the only one who contacted me. You don't have anything to talk to me about, do you? Wait, please, just hear me out. Well, since it's probably the last time, I'll listen. I'm going to be hospitalized again. By this point, I wasn't surprised anymore. How long are you going to be in the hospital? You'll need to handle it yourself from now on. I don't have any money. I've supported you as much as I could until now, but I'm not obligated to do that anymore. Why don't you ask someone else for help? There's no one else who can help. Well, you had someone until now. That's too bad. If that's all you wanted to talk about, I'm hanging up now. Good luck. I was satisfied that I could convey my sarcasm in the end. I could imagine his expression. After that, the divorce was finalized smoothly, and I received the proper compensation. Finally, I was free from the shackles of marriage. I couldn't be happier. By the way, I got a call from him too. This was a week after I had received the call. Oh, really? Yeah, but of course. I told him I couldn't do anything to help. That's the right answer. He should struggle for a while, make up for the past. I'm still living with my sons, surrounded by my sons, daughters-in-law, and grandchildren. I'm happy. I wasted almost 10 years, but it's not too late to start over. From now on, I want to live a peaceful life, making up for lost time. The maternity ward was warm as a spot in the sun. And Emily holding her baby must be at the peak of happiness right now. Gonna hold her? Emily say with a smile to John standing next to me. John, feeling embarrassed in front of a colleague, scratched his head and looked at me. Nah. I'd be scared dropping her. Better not right now. Really? Emily glances at me, briefly before turning her gaze back to her baby. It was clear she was trying to one-up me, someone without children. I wish I had a kid of my own. I nearly burst out laughing at John's cheerful muttering while looking at Emily. Holding it back, I deliberately reply with a straight face. What? Isn't there one right in front of you? That's sure as if it were the most natural thing. Both John and Emily look at me with puzzled faces. Then a person who enters the room hands them something that turns their faces pale. My name is Sarah, 29 years old. John, my husband, turning 32, and I are in our 5th year of marriage. Actual patient, doing different departments. We worked at the same company and married after an office romance. John, a salesperson bringing in contract after contract, was dashing, and with his excellent sales record, he was the darling of us female employees. Without any real contact with him, I used to just secretly watch John as we passed each other in the hallway. The way I started talking to John was really just a fluke. He helped me pick up some documents I had dropped in the hall. Sorry, thank you so much. Oh no, it was my fault for bumping into you. No, not at all. I was just spacing out. He's saying no back and forth. We couldn't help but find the situation a bit funny. While picking up the documents, we looked up, met each other's eyes, and laughed. From then on, if we met in the hallway, we'd chat. And if we left at the same time, we'd go out for drinks or dinner. John's stories as a salesman were broad and interesting, and I thought, no wonder he's top in sales. When we decided to get married, I heard several female colleagues were quite shocked. I quit my job once we got married and became a housewife. Due to certain circumstances, I started working again 2 years ago, but at a different company from John. Since then, we've been working hard together. Patience. Now, although we still have a mortgage, we've managed to buy our own condo and have a little savings. I wouldn't say we're as lovey-dovey as in the early days of our marriage, but I think John sometimes comes home late from work, but on the days he gets back early, he's right there doing household chores with me. You're working too, Sarah. It's only fair, he'd say. My friends would get jealous, telling me, you've got yourself a great husband. Despite the joy we share, we've got our own set of problems. The biggest is that we still don't have any kids. John and I both adore children. We dream about buying our daughter cute dresses, or playing with our son on lazy Sundays. We've been dreaming together since we were newlyweds. Yet despite our wishes, we're still childless after 5 years. With my age creeping up, I'm starting to think it might be time to seriously consider fertility treatments. John, on the other hand, has been unusually relaxed these days. A few months back, he was all "let's work on this together," but now it's as if he's lost interest. He stopped talking about children altogether. "Hey, don't you want kids anymore?" I asked. John looked at me surprised. Why would you think that?" "Because you've stopped mentioning it lately," I replied a little petulantly. At that, John gave me a soft smile. "That's not true at all. I want to have children with you, Sarah, but I don't want to pressure you too much," he explained and gave me a comforting hug. Another issue is the slightly tense relationship between John and my dad. My mom says they'll get along eventually, but whenever John is around my dad, he gets noticeably tense, making me wonder if they'll ever really hit it off. After 5 years of marriage, it's understandable that John is still nervous. Because my dad is the executive vice president of the company he works for. When he first came to my house to introduce himself, he was so nervous he couldn't speak properly. My dad even had to joke, "You're one of my salesmen, aren't you?" I got mad, saying, "John is the top in sales." My dad laughed it off, saying it was just a joke, which finally got John to smile. I sometimes wonder if he struggles at work because everything he does is quickly known to his father-in-law. When I express my concern, John just laughs it off. "It's not that bad. When you're the son-in-law of the executive VP, even the bosses and seniors start treating you differently," he says. "Really? I mean, it's not like I'm using that to my advantage, but they just tend to be more considerate," he explains. I never had that around me. Doesn't that make work harder for you?" I wonder. "Nope," he says, laughing, seeming quite comfortable with the situation. As truth be told, there's another reason why things are awkward between John and my dad. Years ago, John messed up financially, in a matter unrelated to his job. It was my dad who bailed him out. That incident led me to start working again, and John ended up owing my dad big time. Since we don't have kids, John and I often go out on dates on our days off. That day, after watching a movie, we bumped into John's coworker while walking around town planning to grab a meal. "What a coincidence to see you here," said Emily, noticing us first. It seems she was out shopping with her husband too. That's a coworker of mine. They got married after we did, also from an office romance, John explained. Emily, who was noticeably pregnant, said she was about to go on maternity leave. "Thank you for always taking care of my husband." Emily's face twitched a bit. "No big deal. Really, it's nothing," she said, her tone mixed with a bit of a joke. Yet I sensed some hostility. It felt like she was somewhat against me. "Hey, that's rude, Tom," Emily's husband chided her, and "I apologies. We're always in your debt," he said. Tom seemed a bit younger than me, but he was solid and likable. His manner of speaking was calm, and he probably excelled as a salesperson. It seemed that Emily got along well with John, as she would touch his arm even in my presence as his wife. Tom looked on at Emily with a mix of astonishment and annoyance. Annoyance? What are you guys planning to do? Her glance in my direction was provocatively challenging. John, sensing that I was not amused, jumped in to smooth things over. Perhaps Tom was suspicious of the relationship between John and Emily, just like I was. Honestly, I didn't have a great impression of Emily, but I was starting to think that Tom might be trustworthy. When suspicion arises, it's hard to shake it off. I didn't think Emily, who was visibly pregnant, would go to a hotel with John, but it was possible that he was cheating. I decided to hire a detective to investigate because stewing over it wasn't my style. I also bought some hidden cameras. I installed them in the living room, the bedroom, and John's study. The detective would watch his movements outside, and I'd monitor everything at home. If he was cheating, something would come up. If not, things would just peacefully return to normal. I always take long baths. That way, it's my way of easing the day's fatigue, soaking in the warm water. I spend at least an hour in the bath, which is my sanctuary. And if John was cheating, this would be a convenient time for him. I brought my smartphone into the bath. While soaking, I checked on John's activities. Most days, he was either watching TV or working on something he brought home. But occasionally, he appeared to be messaging someone or making a phone call. I had chosen cameras with motion detection so they'd record even when I wasn't watching. I diligently checked the recordings and audio. And to cut a long story short, my desire to trust John was completely betrayed. To make matters worse, I learned that Emily's baby was John's. What? While watching the recorded footage, I couldn't help but let out a gasp. John was on the phone with Emily asking, "Is our baby doing okay?" I couldn't hear her response, but his tone wasn't joking when he replied, "That's exciting." During John's bath time, I checked his phone. I was shocked by the messages between him and Emily. "Are you okay?" Aunt suspected. "No worries. He doesn't even know he's infertile." That's a real blow to his manhood. It was too pitiful to tell him. Reading through the exchange between the two of them, it makes me feel uneasy. I wanted to tell them that as human beings, they're both finished. I suppose she wants to say that she cheated because her husband, Tom, is sterile and that's how she got pregnant. Or is he planning to excuse himself by saying he got his mistress pregnant because his wife, me, wasn't conceiving? At the patients, I scrolled through their conversation on the screen and took photos with my smartphone, saving them as evidence. Furthermore, obtain Tom's contact information from John's phone. Wouldn't someone feel the same way I do and want revenge on the two of them? On the two of them after seeing this, two heads are better than one. It's always good to have company when dragging them through the mud. I made sure to gather enough evidence before contacting Tom, just in case he wouldn't believe his wife. Emily was cheating, and just in case Tom sided with Emily and got in my way, I arranged to meet Tom at the cafe without letting Emily or John know. But to avoid alerting him, I phoned ahead and let him know that Emily and John were having an affair. Perhaps he had already suspected it because he didn't seem overly surprised or distressed when he showed up at the cafe. When I thanked him for coming, he just shook his head and said, "No." I was actually thinking it might be a good time to talk to you, Sarah, about something. I asked about what, but Tom wanted to hear my story first. He said that talking about it would be betraying John, and he needed a good reason to do that. I showed Tom the evidence collected by the detective and the evidence I had gathered myself. When he saw the images discussing sterility, Tom's face contorted. "Lips, Emily seems quite sure about it here. Do you have any idea about this?" "Yes. We've been married for 3 years, and about a year after we got married, we both went for a test." Tom and his wife had been very keen on having children right from the start of their marriage. So he thought it odd that they hadn't had any luck after a year. After we both went for testing, I haven't actually seen the test results myself. Emily just told me everything was fine with her. Listening to him, I wondered why, knowing that Tom couldn't have children, Emily didn't divorce him. "Oh, that's because Emily is in debt," he said. Apparently, Emily, with her strong desire to show off, had immediately purchased brand-name bags and clothes to look good. Her salary wasn't enough, and she had been borrowing money to make expensive purchases. Tom mentioned that they were now repaying the debt to Gipper on the condition that Emily wouldn't make any more extravagant purchases. Recalling how Emily had acted the last time I saw her, I could see how her need to show off fit the picture. She must have been unable to stand that John was paying more attention to me than to her, and perhaps she wanted to make Tom jealous as well. "Debt, huh?" "And is a perfect match for her then," I blurted out, and Tom gave me a puzzled look. As thanks for his openness, I decided to tell him about something John did 2 years ago. "I'm thinking of getting a divorce," I said. "Yes, so am I. It's easier to discuss this knowing you're considering it too," Tom replied. Then he shared something he had been keeping to himself. "Did you start talking to John because you bumped into him?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, I dropped my documents and John helped me pick them up. That was no accident," he cut in. "What?" "He did it on purpose to create an opportunity." According to Tom, Owen had noticed my glances at him for some time. He was sure that given a chance, he could become close to me. As my cheeks turned red realizing I had been so obvious, Tom continued, "If it had been purely out of interest in you, Sarah, it would have been fine. But that wasn't the case." "Different how?" "Yes, because you're the executive's daughter." Unn seemed pretty proud when he told Tom that he had gotten close to the executive director's daughter. And by that, he meant me. He seemed to think marrying me would be an easy ticket to climbing the corporate ladder. It all makes sense now. That's why he was way too conscious of my father and got so nervous when he came to greet us. He started telling people he didn't like at work that he could just mention it to my father-in-law, the executive director, he bragged. I hadn't known since I'd left the company. John said people were just being considerate on their own, but that's not it. He married me to use me, to leverage my father's position like a threat. In spite of that, he becomes such a nervous wreck in front of my dad. I can't help but think he's a sorry excuse for a man. I told Tom, "Could you get tested again?" "I'll get tested too." John and Emily. I had no intention of forgiving either of them, and had been anxious and restless for days before we went to celebrate the birth. "What should we buy for the celebration?" "It's a boy," he'd say, delighted, picking out gifts. The maternity ward was a warm, sunny space. When we arrived, both Emily and Tom welcomed us. When John handed over the clothes he'd chosen, Emily was thrilled and Tom stepped out to get us drinks. The Emily, holding the baby under John's watchful eye, must have been on top of the world. "Wanna hold him?" John asked me with a smile, standing next to me. But with my colleagues around, John scratched his head and shyly said, "Nah," looking at me. Facing my cool gaze, he quickly tried to regain his composure. I'd be scared to drop him. "I'll pass for no." "Really?" Emily glanced at me and then chuckled, turning her attention back to the baby. It was clear she was trying to one-up me, childless as I am. "I'd love to have a kid of my own," John said cheerfully, looking at Emily. I almost burst out laughing at that and had to force myself to keep a straight face. Isn't there one right in front of you?" "Right in front of you." Experience. I said it as if it was the most natural thing, and both John and Emily looked at me with puzzled faces. "What are you talking about?" John started to say when the door to the ward swung open abruptly. Tom came in with a couple of bottles of water saying, "Sorry for the wait," and handed us the bottles, giving Emily a folded piece of paper last. Emily took the paper from him and unfolded it. "About weeks, right, to axe after pleitnir." "Etchery," Emily exclaimed in shock as she unfolded the paper to reveal it was a divorce notice. "Is this some kind of joke?" she panicked. John also looked startled as he peered at the document in her hand. "Come on, Tom, quit the bad jokes at a time like this. It's in poor taste." "It's no jokes," Tom said flatly. Emily's face went pale with confusion while John reached out to grab Tom. That's when I stepped in front of John and presented my own divorce papers. Mine were already unfolded, clearly visible. Unfroze for a second, then slowly turned his gaze to me. "Just so you know, I'm not joking either," I said. I walked over to Emily's bed, said, "Excuse me," and started laying out photos on the bed. They showed John visiting Emily's house often during her maternity leave. "But what business did you have at my house when my husband was away?" I asked. John, as a salesperson, had been using his position to visit Emily when Tom was out for work. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I cause a misunderstanding?" I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd check in. You know, sure, Emily and I started at the company together, and I figured she'd be anxious about her first baby. Yeah, John was just being considerate. How rude of you to suspect something else, Emily defended. Their panic was almost laughable, as if they could talk their way out of this situation. It was even more ridiculous. Oh, so you were worried and in touch at night too. Was that concern for Emily? Or for the child in her belly? Perhaps your own? Anne looked angry as I said this. Cut it out already. Emily is my coworker, and this is her first child, so of course she's going to be anxious and worried. Yeah, just because you can't have kids doesn't give you the right to pick on me. You're just jealous of me, aren't you? I couldn't help but snort through my nose at Emily's words. Emily's face turned red with anger, and she gritted her teeth and glared at me. Don't take this woman seriously. Tom, this child is genuinely yours, Emily said, trying to cover up. Then Tom let out a mocking laugh. At the same time, I showed Emily the screen of my smartphone. Air recorded was a conversation of her husband mocking his own sterility with John. Next, I played a video where he asked, "Is our child doing well?" See, there's the date and time. Should we check whom you were calling at this time, right here and now? Emily laughed mockingly back at John, who was momentarily silenced. The person I was on the phone with. It was me. So what? We're co-workers. We joke around like this. I looked down at Emily with pity as she looked up defiantly. What's with that look? Knock it off. As she tried to stand up, the baby almost fell. I caught the baby and told Emily, hold on to him properly. He's a precious life. The baby, who had been sleeping until now, woke up and began crying loudly. Shut up. Emily yelled, just as Tom unfolded a piece of paper. I can't have kids. Emily, you know that better than anyone. Emily looked up at Tom, who spoke quietly, and froze. Contrary to his calm manner of speaking, his sharp eyes harbored anger as they looked down on Emily. Let's get a divorce, we both said to our partners. John, still trying to fix things, said to me, this happened because you can't have kids. Sarah, there must be something wrong with you just like Tom. It's not me. It's you. Sarah, can you not speak to me so arrogantly when we're about to get a divorce? I wouldn't abandon you even so. That's why. I threw the test results in John's face. Who do you think you're talking to in such a condescending tone? Did you think if it was my fault, you'd be forgiven? As the results paper momentarily stuck to John's face before falling. He exclaimed, oh, too bad there was nothing wrong with me. It turns out there's nothing wrong with you either. Maybe it was just a matter of timing. X reactions. I slowly spelled it out for him. Divorce. You do understand what divorcing me entails, right? Anne's face turned pale instantly. I'm so sorry. I'll never cheat again. Please forgive me. Emily's astonished voice came out as John begged. Tom and I exchanged a glance and laughed. John's mistake from 2 years ago. Without knowing much about it, he dabbled in stocks, racked up a debt of over $100,000. My father covered for him, and I started working to help pay it off. My father said, "You can use the money for yourselves," and that's how I was able to buy the apartment. But that was just because he was my father-in-law. $100,000 covered by him. Of course, I made John sign a promissory note. From now on, in addition to paying alimony to me and Tom, he'd be facing relentless collection from my father. With Emily's debt as well, they were bound for a rough life. It was clear as day. Well, good luck. You'll be working together from now on. We'll handle this through our lawyers, I said, leaving John crying on the floor as Tom and I left the hospital room. My father, more furious than I, hired a lawyer he knew to squeeze every penny out of John. Even using John's share of our shared assets, it wouldn't be nearly enough. John, once remarried to Emily but ignorant of each other's debts, was scolded by Emily's parents upon learning the situation and divorced again soon after. Emily's parents had temporarily covered her debts, and she returned to her parents' home, but they were still obliged to pay alimony to me and Tom. Subjected to daily blame from her parents. Emily was living a restricted life. Despite that, the baby, their grandchild, is adored by Emily's parents, living a life without want, it seems. I too was worried about the innocent babe, so that's a relief. John, of course, couldn't stay on at the company and had to resign. But he's got to pay off debts, alimony, and child support. And now it looks like he's living in a cheap apartment, working from dawn till dusk. As for me, I've rented an apartment and started living solo. I've become good drinking buddies with Tom, and we meet up to go drinking on the weekends. He's not as talkative as John, but I quite like the calm moments that flow by with him. The plane uncle is gonna ride with some lady looks like it's gonna catch fire. He really shouldn't get on that plane. Action said an exclamation from little Emily caught both husband and wife off guard, prompting a surprised huff from both. Especially me. I was doubly shocked. A plane ride with another woman. I thought he was just going on a business trip. Why does he need to ride with a woman? The reason quickly became clear. Unforgivable. But to think he'd betray me and plan a romantic getaway. Ignoring the advice of better not get on that plane. John, my husband, went off to the airport anyway. So I decided to start my own revenge drama. My name is Susan Harris, a housewife in my 30s. I live with John, my husband. We're both working, so the house is often empty. We tend to spend our weekends just chilling at home, but recently, John has been acting a bit strange. He's been coming home much later than before. It's even on weekends. He often leaves the house claiming he has work. The number of times he's gone on business trips, leaving the house empty for days, has increased. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find John's behavior. John's behavior is suspicious, but I haven't found any definitive proof. Besides, I was scared to stir the pot by pointing out John's behavior. So today, like every other day, I turn a blind eye to John's selfish actions, and somehow we keep our marriage going. Then, one day, a little visitor came to our house. It was Emily, my brother and his wife's daughter. To me, she's my niece. My brother and his wife live close by, and we often dine together and go shopping, interacting in various ways. I've watched over Emily since she was a baby, and I often visit my brother's house to play with her, so Emily has grown quite fond of me. We turn on a day when my brother and his wife absolutely couldn't. I, having the day off, agreed to have Emily over and look after her for the day. "Auntie, let's play. Emily wants to play with dolls," she said with a smile as bright as a blooming flower as soon as she saw me, begging to play. I was completely smitten with Emily. "Okay, please take good care of her today," my brother said. "Don't, honey. A call if anything comes up." When I said that, my brother smiled as if relieved. Then I brought Emily home, and we spent a fulfilling day playing with dolls and baking cookies with the ingredients I had prepared. In the midst of this, I heard the door open. "Keep it down, will ya? It's my day off and you woke me up," grumbled John as he came out of his room. He didn't seem to notice Emily was there and glared at me before letting out a big sigh. "Generally, if you know your husband is resting at home, wouldn't you try to keep it down and let him rest peacefully? Can't you even be considerate of such trivial things? You're really failing as a wife." And first, I thought it was just a child's play and responded casually with, "Is that so?" However, after experiencing several instances where things happened exactly as Emily had said, I came to accept that this child must indeed be seeing something extraordinary. So, without doubting her words, I just nodded and carried on. A few minutes later, I heard a loud noise from the washroom, followed by John's angry voice. "Ouch." Once again, it happened just as Emily said it would. John came back from the washroom, his face red, and started hurling more terrible words at me. "You could have at least cleaned the bathroom properly. Because of you, I slipped and fell." Even though I knew I wasn't the type to neglect cleaning, and that the bathroom was always spotless. John's claim was clearly due to his own carelessness, and it was unbearable how he was pinning it on me. "I always keep it clean. Don't blame me for your own carelessness. Okay, don't talk back to me. It's your fault, so apologize properly." His words were so unreasonable that I was utterly astounded. But despite it all being his own doing, he was pushing the blame on me, making me apologize just to vent his frustrations. I sighed at John, who's like a small child unable to even control his own emotions. At the beginning of our marriage, John wasn't this selfish. He was rather a person who seemed to care about others. But as time went by, John began to show his true colors. He really didn't seem to care about anyone else at all. Just 1 month into our marriage, I found myself living as John's maid. I basically couldn't talk back to John, and even if I was made to do something I didn't want to, I couldn't complain. That was the rule imposed on me. If asked whether I wasn't angry about it, honestly, I doubt I could nod in agreement. However, I dreaded making waves in our marriage and complicating our life together even more. It's about a week had passed since the day Emily came to our house when news of John's next business trip came in. This was his third trip this month, and this time he was not going to be back for about a week. On the day he was to leave, as I was helping him pack, my phone rang. Who could it be? It was from my brother's phone. Thinking something might be wrong, I excused myself from John and answered the call, only to find Emily on the line. She probably borrowed my brother's phone. Emily sounded panicked on the other end. I told her to calm down and listen to what she had to say, and then she dropped a bombshell. Uncle's plane, the one with a lady on it, it's gonna catch fire. He really shouldn't get on that plane. I was shocked for two reasons. Emily's words about the plane catching fire and the fact that John was boarding a plane with a woman, despite being on a business trip, was unthinkable. It was getting me nowhere just thinking about it. So I told John that Emily had called and said, if possible, it's best not to get on the plane. But John brushed it off, saying, I ain't got no obligation to play along with a kid's game. Today's trip is set. No way I'm not going. And he left the house. Emily's predictions had never been wrong before. It's likely not going to be any different this time, and John will probably meet a terrible fate. As his wife, I probably should tell him to turn back immediately. But more than that, I was concerned about why he was getting on a plane with another woman. I couldn't help but feel like I needed to uncover the reason behind why such a situation had occurred. So I decided not to stop John forcibly and just watch how things would unfold, so I could be ready to start my own vengeance if need be. Sometime later, while I was relaxing at home, the word breaking news flashed on the television that I had left on. Curious, I saw that a plane that had just left Japan had crashed. I had a bad feeling, and upon checking, sure enough, it was the plane John was on. The TV showed images of the plane on fire, perhaps ignited by gasoline. Was this what Emily was talking about? Just as I was starting to make sense of it all, I received a call from the rescue team. John had been rushed to the hospital and was in a touch-and-go situation. They also asked about a woman who was with John, apparently in her 20s and worked nights, who had unfortunately died immediately after the accident. The rescue worker had tried to contact her relatives, but couldn't reach anyone and, as a last resort, asked me. Basically, I had no information about her and had to confess as much. After thanking me for my cooperation, the rescue worker hung up. Luckily, saving efforts were likely still ongoing. I couldn't help but feel sorry for those involved in the accident. John was taken to the ICU. Due to the urgency of his condition, no visitors were allowed until he was stable, even family. Well, I should have been upset by this. I had other things I wanted to do, so it worked out for me. I properly informed both our families about John's accident. My in-laws were especially shocked, and hearing my mother-in-law break down, crying over the phone, genuinely pained me. But my desire for revenge is far from over. I won't be satisfied until I've dragged him through so much hell that he regrets even clinging to life. I could never forgive John for treating me like nothing more than a maid while he gallivanted about and engaged in affairs. A few days later, I got a call from the hospital. Apparently, that John had regained consciousness. His condition was gradually improving, and soon he was moved to a general ward, so I steeled myself to visit him. When I mentioned John's name at the hospital, the nurse looked at me with pity and said, "Ah, the one from that accident." I've been frequently checking the news, and it seems that the crash was one of the worst in history, with many lives lost. Among them, I sensed an extraordinary will to live in John, who had miraculously survived. Led by the nurse to his room, I found John asleep, connected to many IV drips. The nurse told me that he was working hard at physical therapy every day, and after it ends, he'd sleep like a log. Since John's doctor was free at the moment, we decided to talk while John was asleep, and I got a detailed explanation about his condition. The doctor said that John suffered severe burns all over his body in the accident, and the impact of the crash also damaged his spine, causing him to lose sensation in his lower body. No matter what treatments are tried, the sensation in his lower body will likely never return. He can no longer walk or even stand, let alone go to the bathroom by himself. Of course, from now on, he'll be forced to live in a wheelchair, and he's currently undergoing rehab to learn how to manage daily life on his own. When John learned that he would never regain sensation in his lower body, he looked utterly hopeless about the future ahead. I had never seen John seriously commit to anything, whether it was his work, relationships, or with me. Hearing that John was diligently doing his rehab, I wondered if there had been some mistake. But John has a high pride, and he probably couldn't accept a life dependent on others, not from me. I think from now on, he's going to have to live with disabilities, and no matter how hard he tries, he won't have any choice but to rely on others. Yet, despite understanding that, he stubbornly refuses to depend on me, which almost made me smirk. The doctor provided me with materials on how to renovate the house for wheelchair access or move to a barrier-free home, and how to better deal with John's disabilities in the future. The more I read the materials, the more I realized the gravity of John's condition, and I suddenly felt a bit sorry for him. But this predicament is the result of his own doing. The patient, if only he had listened to Emily's words and canceled that affair trip, all of this could have been avoided. It wasn't even work-related. He should have prioritized his own life. That would have probably saved the life of his affair partner as well. Due to John's poor judgment, one life was lost, and now he has to live bearing a heavy burden. But I've truly realized how important it is to trust and accept others' words. I've always trusted Emily and her advice, and I'm so glad I did. I'm thinking of sending Emily a thank you message later when John groaned and woke up. "Susan, is that you? You came? Seen me?" John looked relieved and continued to speak. "I've been lonely since you haven't visited for a while. Thanks for coming. I can't offer you anything but make yourself at home. This was a completely different attitude from the John who used to belittle me and treat me like a maid. Actually, I wondered if the accident caused him to lose his memory, but the next words out of his mouth brought me back to reality. Did the doc fill you in? I asked my lower half. It's not gonna move anymore. It's hospital life. It's like being in hell. I hate the idea of having a stranger take care of my personal needs. I prefer you 100 times over. I just want to be discharged and go home. Un's pride was evident. He couldn't stand being cared for by the nurses. Even though the nurses were just doing their job for him, I thought it incredibly ignorant to speak like that. And John continued with his selfish remarks. I know I've become like this, but being with you makes me want to keep on living. So let's continue to support each other as husband and wife. Okay? We continue to support each other. If my memory serves me right, we've never supported each other as a couple. Even once. John always left the household to me and went out to play. I turned a blind eye because he was tired from work, but if he's been cheating, that's a whole different story. Cheating is outright betrayal. The more I talk to John, the angrier I get. I'm overwhelmed by the feeling that I must not forgive this man. And my instincts scream to bring him down completely so he can never be so presumptuous again. I'm unaware of this. Don suggests maybe we should just move, or living with my parents might not be a bad idea, as if he hasn't woken from his dream. That's why I decided to make him face reality first. Sorry, but I have no intention whatsoever of taking care of you. At my words, Don's eyes widen in shock. Then, with a trembling voice full of disbelief, he scrambles for words. Don't make such a cruel joke, please. I genuinely believe that you would accept me, help me out. But to hear such a joke, it really hurts. It's not a joke at all. I'm serious. Let's get a divorce. I can't stand the thought of continuing as your wife after the way you behaved, not to mention the cheating. And I certainly won't be taking care of you. When I make myself clear, An seems to finally understand how I feel, and he starts to babble in panic. But that's just too much, isn't it? As you can see, I've become paralyzed from the waist down. I can't live on my own. I need you. Please don't abandon me. You're all I have. The tears well up in John's eyes. He must be serious about trying to hold on to me. Never before has John tried to face me this honestly. Even when I tried to confront the issues, he would brush me off, saying it's too troublesome and wouldn't even engage in a proper discussion, which is essential for a married couple. But now he's suddenly saying he wants to talk, seemingly in an attempt to protect himself. But it's not for my sake, or because he wants us to work as a couple. It's just John being selfish, wanting me to remain as his maid, to make his life easier going forward. I have no obligation to indulge such selfishness, and there's nothing in it for me. It was with the old me, who loved John with all her heart, no matter how problematic his behavior, have listened to his words and agonized over them. Maybe, if I accept John now, even if we can't support each other, we might have a different kind of marriage, a bit closer to what it should be. An has a high self-esteem and can't bear to rely on others, so even in this state, he'd probably find work and try to support himself. If there's a chance to start over, it would be now. Such an opportunity won't come again. If I abandon John here, that's the end of our relationship. As copula as bright taper elf, we'll never go back to being a couple, and he'll lose his support in me, likely facing hardship. If I leave John now, I might be dooming him to a life of wandering, lost and alone. It's a significant decision as a person and as John's wife. But I've already decided not to go back, because the love has cooled and the trust in John is gone. Sure, if I accept him now, we might talk seriously for a while and lead a life more like a married couple. But I've grown tired from being treated like John's servant for so long. I can't bear the thought of striving for his sake any longer. Please think it over. It outwards a crab shell. I really can't do anything. Look at me. I can't walk or even stand. Don't just leave a guy like this alone. John's tone is earnest. He knows if he loses me now, he's finished. It was clear to me that he was desperate to keep me tied to him here, to not let me go. But still, I'm sorry. I just can't continue with you anymore. So please give up. And that. I stand up to leave. John looks at me and pleads, "Wait, let's talk," but I leave the hospital room without listening to his cries. Soon after, my divorce from John was finalized. Just a mutual acquaintance of John and me just happened to know about John's affair, and when they heard about John's accident, they testified in court, which swung things even more in my favor. John begged me not to leave him, crying until the end, but my disgust for him had grown. For him had grown so strong that I couldn't stand the sight of him and didn't take any of his words to heart. These Keeples, I was able to claim a reasonable amount in alimony, though it wasn't a large sum. However, John had to quit his job because of the accident, and now he's working at a company that employs people with disabilities, doing much simpler work, so his salary has decreased. He's struggling to make ends meet with the alimony payments and can't afford a decent life. John's parents disowned him as soon as the affair came to light, and they didn't care if he was in a wheelchair. They want him to live strong on his own from now on. As for me, I'm living a relatively happy life after divorcing John. My brother and his wife, worried about me suddenly being single, bring Emily over often, which keeps me from feeling lonely. "Auntie, let's play. Let's play." Emily's words were the wake-up call I needed. That's why I'm so grateful to her. As an aunt, I want to keep trying to be a reliable presence for her. "Why were you alone in the car?" I was told to wait quietly. "So Grandma got out of the car, huh?" "How long were you alone in the car?" "I don't know. About one cartoon's worth." It seems my mother-in-law, on a sweltering day, left my daughter in the car and went into a motel with her lover. It took me about 15 minutes to rescue my daughter, so she must have been trapped in the car for about 45 minutes, right? I can't forgive my mother-in-law for putting my daughter in such danger. Why are you here? My daughter and I confronted my mother-in-law and her lover in front of the motel. My car! Why would you do this? But upon seeing the state of her car, my mother-in-law rushed towards it frantic. Now the real punishment begins. I'm a 29-year-old office worker. My husband, Jake, is 2 years younger, and we had a shotgun wedding 3 years ago. Since it was a shotgun wedding, I was worried about the impression I'd make on both our parents and my in-laws. However, my worries were unfounded as both sets of parents were happy about our marriage and the grandchild. It seems that having a child before marriage isn't frowned upon as much anymore. After my maternity leave ended and I returned to work, my mother-in-law, Mandy, started taking care of my daughter, Lily. As I guessed meeting, I was anxious about how child rearing would go, but thanks to Mandy, it was resolved. Mandy's house is within walking distance, and she is a stay-at-home mom, so her schedule is flexible. She would come over around the time my husband and I went to work and would leave when we came home. Because I like it, thank you so much. I always tell you, don't worry about it. Oh, but I can't come tomorrow. Sorry. It's okay. I've known about it and one day we'll manage. I truly am saved by Mandy and sometimes feel guilty for relying on her too much. Now Lily goes to preschool, and when we are late from work, Mandy picks her up and waits with her at our place. Mandy drives Lily to preschool and sometimes takes her places on the way back. So, Lily spends a lot of time with Mandy and is quite attached to her. Do you like Grandma? Yeah, I like her. Though I rely on her, sometimes I feel a bit sad thinking Lily might like Mandy more than me. As in preschool, it's common for a parent to pick up the kids, and some children aren't happy when their grandparent comes instead. But Mandy, only 51 and still beautiful, doesn't look like she could be a grandmother. The first time I went with Mandy to pick up Lily, the teacher mistook her for my sister. I'd like to boast about my beautiful mother-in-law, but as a woman, I felt a bit envious. I hear many people have mother-in-law issues, but Mandy and I have no problems at all. I consider myself blessed with family relations. However, this was a misconception, and I was unaware that a problem was starting to arise. Thankfully, today Mandy went to pick up Lily from preschool again. At least, that's what was supposed to happen, but when I finished work and got home, nobody was there. Ike probably hasn't returned from work yet. If Mandy and Lily aren't here, they must have gone somewhere together. Usually, I wouldn't worry too much if Lily wasn't at home, as I'd expect Mandy, her grandmother, to be with her. But today I'm later than usual, and it's already 7 p.m. What should I do? Should I call Mandy to check in? But I always feel like I'm rushing her back when she's been so good to look after Lily all the time. Would that be rude? As I was agonizing over whether or not I should call Mandy, Jake came home. I decided to consult with Jake about calling Mandy. It's already 7 o'clock. Don't you think we should call? Yeah, but Mom should be with her. Indeed, it's a tough call. How about we wait another hour? He suggested. Both of us felt hesitant to call Mandy right away, so we decided to wait a little longer. Then, 30 minutes later, Mandy and Lily came home. Where's home? Look. I got another toy. Lily exclaimed, "Oh, welcome back. We were worried about you," I said, relieved to see Lily's smile. If you're going to be late, at least give us a heads up." Jake said, "I'm sorry, we got stuck in traffic. I thought we'd be home shortly, so I didn't call, but it got so late. I'll be more careful next time." Mandy apologized. This should prevent the kind of worry we experienced today. Yet after that, it gradually became more common for Mandy to return late when she took Lily out. And home. Today we had crepes. Lily said, "Did you thank Grandma properly?" I asked. Lily seems to enjoy her outings with Mandy, but recently it's becoming a source of anxiety for me. "Thanks at you, Mom. I've told you to let us know when you'll be late. What's the big deal if we're a little late? I want to spend time with Lily too," Mandy retorted. "Mandy, I truly appreciate you looking after Lily. But could you please answer the phone when we call? I tried calling several times today." I mentioned, "Well, sometimes I don't notice the phone, or I might be driving and can't answer." Mandy explained, "That's true," I said, wondering if I had spoken out of turn. Mandy seemed a bit upset, not wanting to spoil our relationship. I reflexively apologized. It seems Mandy doesn't intend to worsen our relationship either, and she said she'd pay more attention before leaving. I'm so curious about where Mandy often takes Lily until late. I asked Lily about it. "Look, Lissy, where do you usually go with Grandma?" I inquired. The mountains, the castle." I'm not getting much from the conversation. Information from a 3-year-old can be vague. Maybe they're going for drives in the mountains or visiting amusement or heritage sites. "Do you enjoy your outings with Grandma?" "I like it because she buys me lots of things." Lily said, Is Lily's affection tied not to Mandy's company, but to the things she gets?" The more I ask, the more mysteries arise. "Don't you have fun going to the mountains or playing in the castles?" "I prefer watching cartoons." "Even though Grandma drives you around, let's try to cut down on the cartoons, okay?" "She's not driving. I watch while waiting for Grandma." "Wait, Grandma leaves you in the car?" "For how long?" "I don't know." "About 4 times through the cartoon's theme song." Lily seems to be saying it's about 4 episodes of a cartoon, which would mean about 2 hours. Lily has her own tablet for watching cartoons and learning. Something unthinkable when we were kids, but these days even 1.5-year-olds can use toy-type tablets, and Lily has been using one since she was 2. Piecing together the snippets I've heard from Lily, a dreadful thought has come to me. It appears that Mandy is leaving Lily in the car while she goes somewhere, and Lily is passing the time by watching cartoons on her tablet. Well, I can't believe Mandy would do something so irresponsible. I feel we need to talk to Jake about it. According to Lily, Mandy leaves her in the car and goes somewhere. I told Jake, "I can't believe it. would Mom do something like that? But if it's true that she's leaving Lily in the car, that's concerning. Right now, it's just a bit humid because of the rainy season, but it could be dangerous as it gets hotter in the summer. You're right to worry. Let's look into this. The next day, we confronted Mandy, the mother-in-law who'd returned home late with our daughter. Lily. Mom, did you take Lily out somewhere again today? I've called multiple times. Why don't you ever answer? Have I not said to contact us if you're gonna be late? That topic again. I told you, there are times I can't answer the phone, right? Also, I asked Lily, and she said that you always leave her in the car. Is that true? What? Lily has no, that's not true. Mandy was clearly flustered. We exchanged glances, silently confirming each other's conclusions. We can't leave Lily with you anymore. Wait a minute. Why are you suddenly deciding this? We really appreciate you taking care of Lily up to now. But we just can't leave her with you if she's being left in the car. Please, let me be with Lily. I won't leave her in the car again. I'll make sure to come home early. Mandy clung to Jake, crying. Touching her, I felt a twinge of guilt, knowing the care she had given Lily up till now, and thought maybe it was too extreme to suddenly not entrust Lily to her. Looking at Jake, I could see he seemed to share my sentiment. P. All right. You won't leave Lily in the car. You'll come home early. Promise me that. And if you break that promise, there won't be a next time. I understand. I'll absolutely keep my promise. After that, Mandy kept her word and started coming home early. Lily also confirmed that she wasn't being left in the car anymore. It was a relief that Mandy was a person who could be reasoned with. However, that relief was short-lived as a month later, she started coming home late again. The chins. Mom, we said there wouldn't be a next time. And yet you're coming home late again. I'm sorry. I'll be more careful from now on. I couldn't believe Mandy's words and looked at her coldly. Looking at Jake, I could tell he felt the same. We can't leave Lily with you anymore. How can you say that? That will happen to Lily. Lily, if I don't go pick her up, there are other options like after-school programs or babysitters. That's terrible. It's pitiful for Lily. Let me go pick her up. Andy's tantrum, like that of a child, left us bewildered. Still, we had already given her a chance, and Jake firmly stated, we said there would be no next time, right? The discussion is over. Some may think us cold-hearted. But if they knew Mandy had left Lily in the car, they might think we were too slow to act. I'm on the side that thinks we were too slow. Perhaps even today. Lily was left in the car. I regretted that I had been too considerate because it was Mandy who had cared for Lily until now and had not said what needed to be said. After that, Mandy tried to visit Lily at our home several times, but each time Jake turned her away. It felt a bit cruel, but it seemed necessary to be tough about it. Since we no longer entrusted Lily to Mandy, we asked the kindergarten for extended care, and whoever of us, Cheek or I, got home early would go pick her up. The earliest we could get her was around 6 p.m. That's about 2 hours later than before, and I worried about the mental strain on Lily. Mama, sorry I'm late. It's not late at all. I'm playing with friends, so it's okay even if it's later. That's not how it works, sweetie. Lily seemed surprisingly okay. Maybe I was worrying unnecessarily. After about 2 weeks, we got used to the new routine of picking up Lily. I was hoping that our life would stabilize like this, but then a small problem arose. I'm going on a business trip from next Friday, so I'm counting on you to take care of Lily on the weekend. What? I've got to work this coming Saturday. Really? What should we do about Lily? If we act now, we should still be able to sign up for the one-day Saturday daycare. It only lasts until noon, so I'll just have to wrap up my work by then. Looks like we can manage this time. But it does worry me that we might not always be able to handle situations like this in the future. On Saturday, I hurried through my work and went to pick up Lily from kindergarten, but then a big problem occurred. Lily's mom, her grandmother, came to pick her up. What? That can't be right. I heard she was coming because both of you parents had to work. You didn't ask Mandy to pick her up, and how did she even know that I had left my daughter at daycare on a Saturday? As I was pondering this, I received a text on my smartphone. The message indicated that my daughter's life was in danger. Trying to keep my cool amidst the panic, I rushed to Lily's location. Like exterior? Was this what Lily meant when she said she was going to the mountain and castle with Mandy? I searched for Mandy's car in the parking lot, fighting off the panic. There it is. I ran over to Mandy's car. Lily was inside, so I first knocked on the window to check on her. She was conscious but drenched in sweat and clearly exhausted. It's late July, and I remember the weather report this morning warned of a continued heat wave. It must be over 95 degrees, and the car interior would be even hotter. How long had Lily been trapped inside? I couldn't forgive anyone for doing this to her. 2 hours after I arrived at the motel, Mandy emerged with a man I didn't recognize. She had a flirtatious look on her face as she hung on the man's arm, but when she saw me and Lily standing outside, her expression reverted to the usual grandmotherly face we knew. You two, seemingly in disbelief. Mandy glanced at the parking lot to check on her car. Seeing her car with shattered windows, she became hysterical. Oh no! My car! Why would you do this? There was no need to break the window. Mandy seemed oblivious to the gravity of her actions. To avoid further scenes, I made sure Mandy understood Lily was safe, then asked the motel staff to take Lily to their staff room. After ensuring Lily was safely inside, I let Mandy have it with all the anger I could muster. I had to break the window to rescue Lily as quickly as possible. When I found Lily in the car, barely responsive, I knew there wasn't a moment to lose. I threw a softball-sized rock at the driver's side window, the farthest from where my daughter was seated, and shattered it. Just to see, even though it was necessary, breaking the car window is something you don't expect to do every day, and my heart was pounding. Of course, the motel staff came running to see what the matter was. Initially, they were wary of me as a potential intruder, but after seeing my daughter's condition, they listened to my explanation. Once they understood the situation, they took us to a cool staff room and provided Lily with a cold compress and juice. "Butch Lakely, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Can I have more juice?" She perked up quickly after cooling down. I nearly burst into tears of relief. I'm so grateful to the kind motel staff. Now that Lily had recovered, I asked her what happened. "Why were you alone in the car?" Lily looked down silently when I asked why she was alone in the car. It seemed like Mandy might have told her to keep quiet. Lily often got treats and toys, probably as hush money. "You got some juice from the motel staff, didn't you? They said they want to hear your story. Grandma told me to wait quietly." Lily answered in a small, anxious voice without looking up. "Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. I'll make sure you won't get scolded for this." "How long were you in the car?" "For the duration of one cartoon." "So after watching that cartoon, you contacted me, right?" "Yeah. It took about 15 minutes for me to receive the email and arrive at the motel, so Lily was probably trapped in the car for about 45 minutes in total. At first, the air conditioning had kept the car cool, but as the engine was turned off, the interior must have gradually heated up. Lily must have sent me a SOS text after she couldn't stand the heat inside the car once the cartoon had finished. It was an extremely hot day, and the car could have turned into an oven in minutes, but fortunately, the car was parked in the shade at the motel, which seems to have kept the air somewhat cooler. Still, the thought of what might have happened if I had been just a bit later sends chills down my spine. But the motel staff listened to Lily's story with curiosity. I answered their implied question. This is why my daughter reached out to me for help. I showed them the screen of the tablet I had given Lily. This yellow icon is an app that lets you easily send a text to a preset location in an emergency. It's simple to use. Just open the app and tap this button here. It's set to send a text with the time and place to my phone. After Mandy first left Lily in the car, I warned her to be more careful next time and forgave her, but I couldn't just leave Lily in her care again without taking some kind of action. So, I installed this app on the tablet just in case and taught Lily how to use it. For Lily, who's adept at using a tablet, operating this app was a piece of cake. That's how I managed to end up here at this love motel to rescue Lily and stand before Mandy right now. So, you wanted to take care of Lily, just as an excuse to have the freedom to sneak around for your affair, huh? Saying you're going out to dine with friends every time you have an affair would eventually raise suspicions. But how did you know to pick up Lily from preschool today when it's Saturday? I thought I might be turned away, but I went to pick her up to take my granddaughter out. When I got there, no one was home and the house was empty. So I wondered if maybe the two of them had left Lily at preschool because of work. That's why I peeked into the preschool. And there was Lily. Your purpose wasn't really to spend time with Lily, was it? You just used her as a tool to cover up your affair, planning to lie later about wanting to play with her, right? My anger grew as I realized how Lily's life had been put in danger and how she had been used as a tool to conceal an affair. As I continued to scold Mandy shrinking back more and more, the timid lover who had only been observing till now tried to interject into the conversation. "I'm sorry. I was wrong too. Quiet, but your story can wait." It's that they mustered the courage to speak up. They shrunk back even more than Mandy at my sharp rebuke. Right now, I'm talking to Mandy and I don't want to be disturbed. And don't you understand how dangerous it is to leave someone trapped in a car? But I did give her a drink, and it was only for a short time. What part of 2 hours seemed short to you? In this heat, Lily was nearly at her breaking point. But I couldn't just bring her into the motel. Obviously, but what kind of person takes a child to the scene of an affair? The responses I got back from Mandy started to seem so absurd that it felt pointless to continue arguing. This is beyond what I can handle. Right, enough with the excuses. Uxers, I apologize for keeping you waiting. The police. After rescuing Lily, I'd already called the cops. I asked if I could speak with Mandy before they came in, so the officers were waiting out of sight. Mandy's face turned pale when the cop showed up. And by the way, her lover's face turned pale too. Isn't calling the police a bit much? Did I really do something so terrible? You'll realize just how bad what you did was when you're at the police station. Just for Mandy and her lover were put in the patrol car and taken to the station. After seeing them off, I headed to the motel staff room where Lily was. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. I couldn't apologize enough to the motel staff. But they were all so kind, joking and telling me to come back with just my husband next time. I'm not usually one for racy jokes, but this time I felt no disgust, just relief that I wasn't scolded. Shall we go home? Lily and T, what about Grandma? She went home earlier with that man. So let's go home with Mom. Before leaving the staff room, I apologized. Mandy was facing multiple charges, including false imprisonment, kidnapping, and abuse. It seemed she took leaving Lily in the car too lightly, and my own awareness was also too lax. The final sentence was a year in jail. Mandy was charged with crimes beyond what I had imagined, and I was shocked. To the most severe of her crimes was apparently the false imprisonment, which carries no fine but only imprisonment. I learned a lot from the police. Mandy's affair had started last fall. However, she had met her lover about 3 years ago and had been pursuing him ever since. What was she thinking at her age? Lily had managed to get through the winter in the car with blankets and warm drinks. But trapping a child in a car is dangerous no matter if it's winter or summer. I'm just glad she's okay. At citations, the lover was a 42-year-old man she met on a dating app. It seems they were buying my daughter things and keeping her quiet. The lover turned out to be married, and now Mandy was being sued for damages by his wife. My father-in-law had enough of Mandy's infidelity at the age of 51 and divorced her. Of course, we cut ties as well. So when Mandy gets out in a year, she'll be completely alone. She won't have anyone to rely on. We'll have to find a job and a place to live, and we'll lead a lonely life. Even after she gets out of jail, her hellish days won't be over. Thankfully, Lily seems fine and healthy even after being left in the car on a scorching day. But there's one problem. Aren't we going to the castle anymore? While Mandy and I were having our showdown outside the motel, it seems Lily was treated to a parfait by the staff. She wants to go back to the castle because she wants that parfait again. What kind of parfait was it? It was this big with a cherry on top. Well then, let's go get an even bigger parfait. The one that's covered with strawberries on top. That's how I always manage to distract her. I'm praying she'll forget all about the castle by the time she's older. Also, this incident has made me reflect on the need to treasure Lily more. So, I quit my job and switched to part-time work. Now I have more time with Lily, and we're enjoying peaceful, fun days.